You don't become mentally unshakable by feeling confident. You become unshakable by training control, daily, deliberately, without excuses. This audiobook is not motivation. It is conditioning. For the next 30 days, you will learn how to stop reacting, stop seeking approval, and stop letting emotions run your decisions. You will build a mind that stays calm under pressure, focused in chaos, and disciplined when motivation disappears. You don't need better circumstances. You need a stronger internal standard. This is not about talent. It's about control. And control is trained. Chapter 1. Emotional strength is not a feeling. Most people wait. They wait to feel confident. They wait to feel motivated. They wait to feel strong. And that is exactly why they stay weak. Here is the truth you need to hear, whether you like it or not. Emotional strength is not a feeling. It never was. It never will be. That's the key. If strength were a feeling, weak people would accidentally become strong every now and then. But they don't. Because strength is not something that arrives. It is something you enforce. You have a choice. Right now, in every moment. You can let emotions decide what you do, or you can decide first, and let emotions catch up later. That's the difference between unstable people and unshakable ones. Mentally unshakable people do not feel ready. They act ready. They do not feel disciplined. They behave disciplined. They do not feel calm. They practice calm. You don't feel your way into control. You act your way into it. That's the key. Most people misunderstand emotions. They treat emotions like commands, like orders that must be followed. I feel tired, so I stop. I feel offended, so I react. I feel scared, so I delay. That's not emotional intelligence. That's emotional slavery. You don't need their permission. Not your emotions. Not other people's. Not your past's. Emotions are information, not instructions. Say that again internally. Emotions are information, not instructions. That's the key. If you only act when you feel good, you are training inconsistency. If you only stay disciplined on good days, you are training weakness. Because life does not test you on good days. Life tests you when you are tired, when you are stressed, when you are bored, when you are emotional. And that's where most people collapse. They think discipline means pushing hard when you feel motivated. Wrong. Discipline means staying consistent when motivation disappears. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline. That's the key. Let's get practical. Think about the last bad day you had. Low energy, bad mood, no excitement, maybe frustration, maybe doubt. What did you do? Did you lower your standards? Did you delay what mattered? Did you give yourself emotional excuses? Most people do. Mentally unshakable people don't. They do the work anyway. They keep their routine anyway. They control their mouth anyway. They control their reactions anyway. Not because they feel strong, but because strength is a decision, not a sensation. You have a choice. Every time you say, "I don't feel like it," you are standing at a fork in the road. One path trains weakness, the other trains control. Choose control enough times, and it becomes automatic. That's the key. Here's where people get confused. They think suppressing emotions is strength. It's not. You are not being told to ignore emotions. You are being told to outrank them. You acknowledge the emotion, you notice it, and then you proceed anyway. I feel anxious, and I act with discipline. I feel angry, and I remain silent. I feel tired, and I keep my standard. That is emotional strength, not emotional numbness, not emotional explosion. Emotional control. It's not about feeling less. It's about reacting less. That's the key. Let me be very clear with you. If you allow your emotional state to decide your behavior, you will never be consistent. And if you are not consistent, you cannot be powerful. And if you are not powerful internally, the world will always control you externally. You don't need their permission. Not your bosses, not your families, not your emotions. Control is an inside job. Now let's install a rule, a non-negotiable rule. Bad days do not cancel standards. Say it again. Bad days do not cancel standards. You train this by doing small, boring, disciplined actions on days you don't feel like it. That's how you build mental muscle. Because strength is built under resistance. And emotional resistance is still resistance. That's the key. Here's a behavioral instruction. Listen carefully. From today forward, you will stop asking, "How do I feel?" before action. You will ask, "What does my standard require?" That question removes emotion from the equation. Standards don't care how you feel, and that's why they work. It's not about comfort. It's about consistency. That's the key. Another instruction. When emotion rises, pause. Do nothing for 5 seconds. Breathe. Observe. Most reactions happen instantly. Control lives in the pause. That pause is where power is built. You have a choice. React or remain in control. Reaction feels relieving in the moment, but it costs you long-term respect from others and from yourself. Control feels uncomfortable in the moment, but it compounds. That's the key. Now understand this. The goal is not to eliminate emotions. The goal is to stop letting emotions lead. Emotions ride in the passenger seat. Discipline drives, and when discipline drives long enough, emotions align automatically. You don't feel your way into control. You act your way into it. Say it again. You don't feel your way into control. You act your way into it. That's the key. Most people never become mentally unshakable because they keep negotiating with themselves. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll start when I feel ready. I'll stay calm next time. No. Mentally unshakable people do not negotiate with weakness. They enforce structure. They don't ask, "Can I handle this?" They ask, "What's required?" That mindset alone separates leaders from followers. It's not about talent. It's not about intelligence. It's about discipline. That's the key. If you master this chapter, your entire identity begins to shift. You stop seeing yourself as emotional. You stop seeing yourself as reactive. You stop seeing yourself as inconsistent. You become someone who acts regardless of mood. And that is the foundation of mental unshakability. But emotional strength alone is not enough. Because even disciplined people lose power when they react impulsively to the world around them. You've learned that strength is not a feeling. Now it's time to eliminate the biggest leak of mental power. Reaction. You built the foundation. Now let's sharpen the weapon. Understood. Lock in again. This is Chapter 2, fully written for voice authority, repetition, and behavioral conditioning. No fluff, no filler. This is training. Chapter 2. Stop reacting. Reaction is the enemy. Reaction is the fastest way to lose power. Say that again. Reaction is the fastest way to lose power. Every time you react emotionally, you give control to something outside of you. A comment, a look, a message, a tone, a situation. That's the key. If someone can control your reaction, they control you. Not partially, completely. You have a choice, always. React or remain in control. Most people react automatically. They don't decide. They don't pause. They explode, defend, explain, justify. And in that moment, they lose authority. That's the key. Reaction feels natural. It feels justified. It feels deserved. But what feels justified is rarely what is powerful. Power is quiet. Power is slow. Power is deliberate. The strongest move is silence. Say it again. The strongest move is silence. Let's break this down clearly. When someone disrespects you and you react, you amplify the disrespect. When someone criticizes you and you react, you validate the criticism. When someone provokes you and you react, you reward the provocation. Reaction multiplies damage. That's the key. Most people think reacting makes them strong. Standing up, defending themselves, correcting the other person. Wrong. That's not strength. That's emotional leakage. It's not about confidence. It's about control. You don't need their permission. Not to stay calm. Not to stay silent. Not to walk away. Control does not require explanation. That's the key. Let's talk about arguments. Arguments only exist because at least two people agree to react. If one person stays calm, the argument collapses. Silence starves conflict. That's the key. If you want fewer problems in your life, stop reacting to every emotional stimulus. Not everything deserves a response. Not everything deserves your energy. Not everything deserves access to your mind. You have a choice. Respond deliberately or react impulsively. Reaction is fast. Response is controlled. Reaction is emotional. Response is strategic. That's the key. Here's where most people fail. They believe silence means weakness. They believe not reacting means losing. No. Silence is not submission. Silence is dominance. When you stay silent, you deny the other person the emotional payoff they want. That's power. The strongest move is silence. Now listen carefully. This chapter is not telling you to become passive. It is telling you to become precise. There is a time to speak, and there is a time to stay silent. Most people speak too much and react too fast. Mentally unshakable people do the opposite. They pause, they observe, they choose. That's the key. Here's a real-world example. Someone criticizes you publicly. You feel the heat rise. Your heart speeds up. Your mind starts preparing defenses. This is the moment. You have a choice. React and hand them control. Or pause and keep your power. If you react emotionally, you look unstable. If you stay calm, you look unmovable. People respect what they cannot shake. That's the key. Another example. Disrespect. Someone talks down to you, questions you, pushes your buttons. Most people snap. Mentally unshakable people don't. They either respond calmly or they disengage completely. No explanation, no justification, no emotional speech. You don't need their permission. Your calm is not negotiable. That's the key. Now let's install a rule. Reaction equals loss. Say it again. Reaction equals loss. Every time you react emotionally, you lose position. You lose leverage. You lose respect, especially self-respect. It's not about being right. It's about being in control. That's the key. Here's a behavioral instruction. When you feel the urge to react, delay your response by 10 seconds. 10 seconds. Breathe. Say nothing. Let the emotional spike pass. Emotions peak fast and fade fast if you don't feed them. Reaction feeds emotion. Silence starves it. That's the key. Another instruction. Reduce explanations. The more you explain, the weaker your position becomes. Strong people don't over-explain. They state. They act. They move on. It's not about convincing. It's about consistency. That's the key. Understand this deeply. The world will test you constantly. People will provoke. Situations will frustrate. Circumstances will challenge. You cannot control the world, but you can control your reaction. That's the only control that matters. You have a choice, always. If you master this, your stress drops, your clarity increases, your authority grows. Not because you dominate others, but because you dominate yourself. That's the key. Now hear this clearly. Silence is not avoidance. Silence is selection. You are selecting where your energy goes. You are selecting what deserves access to your nervous system. Most people let anything trigger them. Mentally unshakable people are selective. That's the key. If you feel anger rising, do nothing. If you feel offense, pause. If you feel the urge to correct, wait. Control first, action second. It's not about suppressing emotion, it's about controlling expression. That's discipline. It's not about emotion, it's about discipline. Say it again. It's not about emotion. It's about discipline. The strongest people you've ever met are not loud. They are calm. They are measured. They are unreactive. They don't need to prove themselves. You don't need their permission. You don't need to explain your silence. Your results will speak. That's the key. As you practice this, something powerful happens. People stop testing you because they get no reaction, no reward, no emotional access. Silence trains respect. Reaction invites manipulation. That's the key. You are building something here. Not just calm, not just discipline. You are building mental unshakability. But reaction is not the only thing draining your power. There is something even more dangerous. The need to talk, to explain, to be seen. You learn to stop reacting. Now you must learn when to stay silent. You removed emotional leaks. Now let's build authority. Chapter 3. Discipline beats motivation. Every time. Motivation is unreliable. Discipline is not. That's the truth most people don't want to hear. Motivation comes and goes. It rises when things are easy. It disappears when things get hard. Discipline stays. That's the key. If your progress depends on motivation, your progress will always be inconsistent. And inconsistency is the enemy of mental strength. You have a choice. You can build a life powered by feelings, or you can build a life powered by systems. Mentally unshakable people choose systems. If you need motivation, you're already unstable. Say it again. If you need motivation, you're already unstable. Motivation is emotional. Discipline is mechanical. Motivation asks, do I feel like it? Discipline asks, what's scheduled? That's the key. Most people wake up and check their emotional state before they act. How do I feel today? Do I have energy? Am I in the mood? That's weakness disguised as self-awareness. Strong people don't consult their mood. They consult their standard. You don't need their permission. Not your emotions, not your bodies, not your past failures. Discipline does not negotiate. That's the key. Here's the hard truth. Motivation feels good, but it builds nothing lasting. Discipline feels boring, but it builds everything. Careers are built on discipline. Strong bodies are built on discipline. Calm minds are built on discipline. Not excitement, not inspiration, not hype. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline. Say it clearly. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline. That's the key. Let's talk about routines. Routines are not exciting. They are repetitive, predictable, boring. And that's exactly why they work. A routine removes emotion from execution. You don't decide. You don't debate. You just do. That's power. Mentally unshakable people design their life so decisions are minimized. Because decision fatigue creates emotional weakness. When everything is a decision, emotions get involved. When things are automatic, emotions don't matter. That's the key. Here's an example. Two people want the same result, same goal, same ambition. Person one waits for motivation. They work hard on good days. They disappear on bad days. Person two follows a routine. They work even when tired, even when bored, even when unmotivated. After 1 year, the gap is massive. Not because of talent, because of discipline. That's the key. Now hear this carefully. Discipline is not intensity. Discipline is consistency. Anyone can push hard for a week. Very few can show up calmly for months. That's what builds mental unshakability. You have a choice. You can chase emotional highs, or you can build emotional stability. Chasing motivation keeps you unstable. Building discipline stabilizes you. That's the key. Most people think discipline is restrictive. They think it limits freedom. Wrong. Discipline creates freedom. When you trust yourself to execute, anxiety drops. When you trust your routine, stress reduces. When you trust your system, confidence grows. Confidence is not a feeling. It's evidence-based. And discipline creates evidence. That's the key. Here's another truth. Motivation is external. Discipline is internal. Motivation depends on music, speeches, people, mood. Discipline depends on standards. That's why motivated people collapse under pressure, and disciplined people stay calm. Pressure exposes systems. If your system relies on motivation, pressure will destroy it. If your system relies on discipline, pressure strengthens it. That's the key. Now let's install behavioral rules. Rule number 1. You do not wait to feel ready. Read that again. You do not wait to feel ready. Readiness is a myth. Action creates readiness. You don't feel your way into momentum. You act your way into it. That's the key. Rule number 2. You decide in advance. Decide your workout time. Decide your work hours. Decide your non-negotiables. Decisions made in advance remove emotional interference. You don't need their permission. Not your moods, not your energies. That's the key. Rule number 3. Lower emotional expectations. Stop expecting every day to feel good. Stop expecting excitement. Stop expecting motivation. Most days will feel neutral. Some will feel heavy. Discipline means you execute anyway. If you expect resistance, you won't be surprised by it. That's the key. Now let's address a dangerous lie. I'll start when I'm motivated. That sentence has ruined more lives than failure ever has, because it delays action indefinitely. Motivation is the reward of action, not the cause of it. Action comes first. Motivation follows. That's the key. Mentally unshakable people understand this. They don't feel driven every day. They feel committed. Commitment outlasts emotion. That's the key. Let's talk about energy. Most people say, I don't have energy. That's not the problem. The problem is scattered energy. Discipline channels energy. Motivation wastes it. When you know exactly what to do, energy increases. When you debate what to do, energy drains. That's the key. Another instruction. Track actions, not feelings. Did you execute today? Yes or no, that's it. Not how did I feel, not was I inspired. Execution is the metric. That's the key. Now hear this. Being disciplined does not mean being harsh. It means being clear. Clear standards, clear routines, clear expectations. Confusion creates emotional instability. Clarity creates calm. That's the key. As you practice discipline, something powerful happens. You stop needing external push. You stop relying on motivation. You stop feeling guilty for low-energy days. You just do what needs to be done. That's mental strength. It's not about enthusiasm. It's about reliability. That's the key. You are becoming someone who executes regardless of mood, regardless of energy, regardless of emotion. That is the foundation of an unshakable mind. But discipline does not exist in chaos. Discipline requires structure. It requires predictable anchors in your day. And nothing anchors the mind faster than how you start your day. You stopped reacting. You stopped chasing motivation. Now it's time to install structure at the source. You are disciplined. Now let's control the first hours of your day. Chapter 4. Control the morning. Control the mind. Your day does not start at noon. It does not start at work. It does not start when problems show up. Your day starts the moment you wake up, and most people lose the day in the first 10 minutes. That's the key. Mental chaos does not appear randomly. It is created slowly, quietly, predictably, by unstructured mornings. You have a choice. You can start your day deliberately, or you can start your day reactively. One builds control, the other builds anxiety. Win the morning. The rest follows. Say it again. Win the morning. The rest follows. Most people wake up and immediately give their mind away. Phone in hand, notifications, messages, news, social media. Before their feet touch the ground, their nervous system is already hijacked. That's not normal. That's trained weakness. You don't need their permission, not your phone's, not the world's, not anyone else's urgency. The morning is not for consumption. The morning is for command. That's the key. When you start the day reacting, you train reactivity. When you start the day scrolling, you train distraction. When you start the day rushed, you train anxiety. And then people wonder why their mind feels unstable all day. You trained it that way. That's the key. Let's be very clear. The first hour of your day sets the tone for your nervous system. It tells your brain whether you are in control or the world is. Mentally unshakable people protect their mornings aggressively. Not because they are special, but because they understand leverage. Win the morning. The rest follows. That's the key. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. If you don't control your morning, you will spend the rest of the day recovering from it. Recovering from distraction. Recovering from stress. Recovering from emotional noise. Strong people don't recover all day. They set direction early. That's the key. Let's talk about phones. Your phone is the fastest way to lose mental control in the morning. Every notification is a demand. Every scroll is comparison. Every headline is emotional manipulation. And you invite that chaos in willingly. You have a choice. Check the phone immediately and surrender control, or delay it and keep authority. That's the key. Here's a rule. No phone in the first 30 to 60 minutes of the day. Non-negotiable. That single rule alone will calm your mind more than most people's therapy. Why? Because it removes external input during your most impressionable state. Your brain is soft in the morning. Plastic. Trainable. Feed it chaos, and you get chaos. Feed it structure, and you get clarity. That's the key. Now let's install structure. A strong morning is not complicated. It's simple, predictable, boring. And boring is powerful. Remember this. It's not about excitement. It's about discipline. Say it clearly. It's not about excitement. It's about discipline. That's the key. Here is what a controlled morning looks like. You wake up at the same time. You don't negotiate with the alarm. You don't ask how you feel. You move. Movement first. Even light movement. Why? Because motion interrupts mental fog. Motion signals control. That's the key. Then silence. No noise. No scrolling. No consumption. Just quiet. You don't need motivation. You don't need inspiration. You need space. Space is where control returns. That's the key. Next, intention. You decide the day before the day decides you. 1 to 3 priorities. Written, clear, not a long list, a command list. What must be done today? That question centers the mind. You have a choice and let the day pull you, or direct the day. That's the key. Now understand this. Your morning routine does not need to be perfect. It needs to be consistent. Consistency trains identity. When you show up the same way every morning, your brain learns, this person is reliable. And when you trust yourself, anxiety drops. Confidence grows. That's the key. Most people chase productivity hacks. They want shortcuts. But mental strength comes from predictability, not novelty. Predictable mornings create predictable focus. That's the key. Let's address resistance. You will not feel like doing this every day. Good. That's the point. If you only do things when you feel like it, you are still emotionally controlled. Morning discipline is not about energy, it's about authority. You are telling your mind, I decide when we start. I decide how we start. That's power. That's the key. Another instruction. Remove urgency from the morning. Urgency creates panic. Calm creates clarity. If everything feels urgent in the morning, your nervous system stays elevated all day. Slow down. You are not behind. You are building control. That's the key. Now listen carefully. A bad morning creates emotional debt. You spend the rest of the day paying it back. A strong morning creates emotional credit. You spend the rest of the day executing calmly. Win the morning. The rest follows. Say it again. Win the morning. The rest follows. That's the key. Let's talk about what to stop doing. Stop checking messages immediately. Stop scrolling in bed. Stop starting your day in reaction mode. Those habits train mental weakness. You don't need their permission to disconnect. You don't owe the world immediate access to your mind. That's the key. What you protect in the morning protects you all day. Now understand this. This chapter is not about becoming a morning person. It's about becoming a controlled person. If you wake up late, you still apply structure. If your schedule is different, you still apply intention. Control is flexible. Chaos is not. That's the key. As you install this, you'll notice something. Your emotions stabilize faster. Your reactions slow down. Your focus sharpens. Not because life got easier, but because your foundation got stronger. You are building an unshakable mind from the ground up. You've learned that strength is not a feeling. You've learned to stop reacting. You've replaced motivation with discipline. Now you've installed structure at the start of the day. But there's another layer. Even with discipline and structure, the mind can sabotage itself, quietly, constantly, through internal dialogue. You've controlled your mornings. Now it's time to control the voice in your head. Because what you repeat internally becomes who you are. Prepare yourself. Chapter 5. Your thoughts are commands, not suggestions. Your mind is always listening. Not sometimes, not occasionally, always. Every word you repeat internally is a command being issued. That's the key. Most people think thoughts are harmless. Just noise. Just reactions. Wrong. Thoughts are instructions, and the brain obeys repetition, not logic. Say it again. The brain obeys repetition, not logic. You can know something is irrational. You can know something isn't true, and still be controlled by it. Why? Because the brain doesn't care what makes sense. It cares what is repeated. That's the key. You have a choice. Always. You can allow automatic thoughts to run unchecked, or you can take control of what you repeat. One creates anxiety, the other creates authority. That's the key. Let's expose the problem. Most people talk to themselves in ways they would never speak to another human being. I'm not good enough. I always mess this up. This is too hard. I can't handle this. And then they wonder why they feel weak. You trained weakness. What you repeat becomes reality. Say it again. What you repeat becomes reality. That's the key. Your internal dialogue is shaping your nervous system. It tells your body whether to stay calm or stay tense, whether to move forward or hesitate. You are either training confidence or training fear. There is no neutral. That's the key. Now listen carefully. You do not need to believe every thought you have. That's freedom. Thoughts appear automatically. But repetition is a choice. You have a choice. Notice the thought, or install the thought. Mentally unshakable people notice negative thoughts, but they do not rehearse them. They don't argue with them. They don't dramatize them. They replace them. That's discipline. It's not about positivity. It's about control. That's the key. Here's a dangerous lie. I'm just being realistic. No. Most of the time, that's fear pretending to be intelligence. Fear loves repetition. Fear loves worst-case scenarios. Fear loves familiar stories. And the more you repeat them, the more real they feel. That's the key. Now let's get practical. The moment a weak thought appears, you pause. You don't fight it emotionally. You don't spiral. You interrupt. I'm not capable. Stop. Replace it. I execute regardless of doubt. Say it again. I execute regardless of doubt. You don't need their permission. Not the thoughts, not the emotions. You are not here to debate with weakness. You are here to overwrite it. That's the key. Another example. This pressure is too much. Replace it. I am built for pressure. Say it again. I am built for pressure. You repeat it calmly, without emotion, without hype. Repetition installs identity. That's the key. Understand this deeply. Your thoughts create emotional momentum. One negative thought doesn't break you. Repeated negative thoughts do. One disciplined replacement doesn't change you. Repeated disciplined replacements do. That's how the mind is trained. That's the key. Now here's the rule. You do not argue with thoughts. You replace them. Arguing keeps them alive. Replacement starves them. That's discipline. It's not about intelligence. It's about discipline. Say it clearly. It's not about intelligence. It's about discipline. That's the key. Let's talk about confidence. Confidence is not something you wait for. Confidence is installed through repetition. If you repeat weakness internally, you will feel weak. If you repeat control internally, you will feel stable. Your feelings follow your commands. That's the key. Here's a behavioral instruction. Choose 3 internal commands: short, clear, non-emotional. Examples: I stay calm. I execute. I handle pressure. Repeat them daily, especially when things get hard. Not loudly, not dramatically, calmly, mechanically. You are programming your nervous system. That's the key. Another instruction. Remove emotional language from your self-talk. Stop saying, I'm overwhelmed. I'm stressed. I'm anxious. Replace with, this requires focus. This requires patience. This requires discipline. Language shapes response. That's the key. Most people strengthen anxiety by naming it repeatedly. They say it. They explain it. They identify with it. You don't need their permission to stop doing that. You are not your emotions. You are the one observing them. That's power. That's the key. Now understand this. Thought control is not about being fake. It's about being intentional. You are not lying to yourself. You are training yourself, just like a coach trains an athlete. Repetition, correction, consistency. That's the key. If you let your thoughts run wild, your emotions will too. And emotional instability leads to behavioral inconsistency. You already learned this. Mental unshakability requires internal order. Thought discipline is internal order. That's the key. Another truth. Silence matters here too. Constant mental noise weakens focus. Constant self-commentary drains energy. You don't need to narrate everything internally. Sometimes the strongest move is silence, even inside your head. That's discipline. That's the key. Now notice something important. As you control your thoughts, pressure will increase. Why? Because growth attracts resistance. Old patterns fight back. And that's good. Because pressure is not punishment. Pressure is training. That's where we're going next. You've learned to command your thoughts. You've stopped letting internal noise dominate you. But the real test of mental strength is not calm moments. It's pressure, deadlines, conflict, expectation, weight. Thought control prepares you. Pressure reveals you. You are ready for that lesson. You've controlled the inner voice. Now let's reframe the external force that scares most people. Pressure. You don't run from it. You use it. You've trained your thoughts. Now let's test them. Chapter 6. Pressure is training, not punishment. Pressure is not your enemy. It never was. Pressure is the test. That's the key. Most people believe stress creates weakness. It doesn't. Stress reveals weakness. Pressure exposes the system you built when things were easy. Say it clearly. Pressure reveals who you trained to be. That's the key. When life applies pressure, it's not asking how you feel, it's asking how you're built. And feelings don't hold under pressure. Systems do. You have a choice, and you can interpret pressure as punishment, or you can use it as feedback. One makes you fragile. The other makes you formidable. That's the key. Look closely at high performers. Athletes, leaders, operators under fire. They don't avoid pressure. They expect it. Pressure is familiar to them. Why? Because they trained for it when no one was watching. Pressure didn't make them strong. It proved they were strong. That's the key. Most people panic under pressure because their life has no structure, no routines, no standards, no emotional control. So when pressure hits, everything collapses. Not because pressure is cruel, but because preparation was missing. That's the key. Here's the truth you need to accept. If pressure breaks you, it didn't break you. It exposed you. That's uncomfortable to hear, but it's powerful to understand. Because now you know what to fix. You don't complain about pressure. You upgrade your system. That's discipline. It's not about stress. It's about discipline. That's the key. Let's break this illusion. People say, I'm stressed. I can't handle pressure. This is too much. No. What they're really saying is, I didn't train for this. Pressure didn't suddenly appear. Life always applies it. Deadlines, expectations, conflict, responsibility. That's normal. What's not normal is being unprepared. That's the key. Mentally unshakable people do something different. When pressure arrives, they don't ask, how do I escape this? They ask, what is this revealing? That question turns pressure into information. That's the key. Example. You freeze during confrontation. Pressure reveals a lack of emotional control. You panic under deadlines. Pressure reveals poor planning. You explode when criticized. Pressure reveals reactive habits. Pressure is diagnostic. That's the key. High performers use pressure like a mirror. They don't blame it. They study it. What failed? What broke? What needs strengthening? That's how systems improve. That's discipline. You have a choice. Use pressure to complain or use pressure to calibrate. That's the key. Now let's install a mindset shift. Pressure is not personal. Say it again. Pressure is not personal. Life is not attacking you. It's testing the structure you built. If the structure holds, you stay calm. If it doesn't, you feel overwhelmed. The solution is never to reduce pressure. The solution is to increase capacity. That's the key. Weak systems avoid pressure. Strong systems absorb it. You don't rise to the occasion. You fall to the level of your training. That's the key. Now hear this carefully. If you wait for pressure to disappear before you act, you will wait forever. Pressure is part of adulthood, part of leadership, part of growth. You don't need their permission to handle it. Not life's, not anyone else's. You train yourself to handle it. That's the key. Let's talk about stress responses. Most people react emotionally to pressure. They rush, they panic, they complain. That response makes pressure worse. Mentally unshakable people slow down under pressure. They simplify, they prioritize, they execute the basics. That's discipline. Pressure doesn't require heroics. It requires fundamentals. That's the key. Here's a behavioral instruction. When pressure increases, reduce complexity. Do fewer things. Do them well. Stick to your routine. Pressure is not the time to experiment. It's the time to rely on what you trained. That's the key. Another instruction. Stop labeling pressure as stress. Words matter. Stress sounds overwhelming. Pressure sounds manageable. Pressure implies resistance. Resistance builds strength. That's the key. Now understand this. Every calm person you admire has been under pressure, repeatedly. The difference is not talent, it's exposure. They exposed themselves to pressure gradually. They trained under discomfort. They didn't avoid hard situations. Pressure became familiar. That's the key. If you live a comfort-based life, pressure will always feel shocking. If you live a disciplined life, pressure feels normal. It's not about toughness. It's about preparation. That's the key. Another truth. Pressure reveals emotional discipline faster than anything else. When things go wrong, what do? Blame? Panic? React? Or pause? Adjust? Execute? That response tells you everything you need to know. Pressure reveals who you trained to be. Say it again. Pressure reveals who you trained to be. That's the key. Now let's address fear. Fear under pressure is normal. Letting fear drive behavior is optional. You have a choice. Feel fear and act with discipline, or feel fear and retreat. One builds strength, the other builds fragility. That's the key. Mentally unshakable people expect discomfort. They don't need things to feel easy. They need things to be clear. Clarity beats comfort. That's discipline. That's the key. Here's another behavioral rule. Do not vent under pressure. Venting feels good momentarily, but it reinforces helplessness. Instead, write down solutions, list actions, move forward. Action neutralizes pressure. That's the key. As you reframe pressure, something changes. You stop fearing hard days. You stop dreading responsibility. You stop collapsing under expectations, because pressure no longer means danger. It means training. You are being sharpened. That's the key. You are not broken by pressure. You are revealed by it. And now you know what to strengthen. But here's the next problem. Even disciplined people sabotage themselves when they obsess over results. They let outcomes control their emotions. They tie their identity to wins and losses. And that creates instability. You've learned to handle pressure. Now you must learn to detach from outcomes. Because the strongest minds don't chase applause. They master the process. You trained under pressure. Now let's refine focus. Chapter 7. Detach from outcomes. Master the process. Outcomes are seductive. They promise validation, relief, applause, and that's exactly why they weaken you. That's the key. The moment your emotional state depends on results, you become unstable. Up when things go well, down when they don't. Calm one day, anxious the next. That's not strength. That's emotional dependency. You have a choice to attach your emotions to outcomes or attach your identity to execution. One creates anxiety, the other creates power. That's the key. Most people say they want results. What they actually want is emotional payoff. They want reassurance, recognition, proof. And when results don't show up fast enough, they panic. They rush. They force. They abandon the process. That's how momentum dies. Obsess over execution, not applause. Say it again. Obsess over execution, not applause. That's the key. Here's the truth. Outcomes are delayed. Processes are immediate. You don't control when results appear. You control what you do today. That's the only leverage you have. Mentally unshakable people understand this deeply. They stop asking, "Is this working yet?" and start asking, "Did I execute today?" That shift alone stabilizes the mind. That's the key. Let's break the illusion. When you obsess over outcomes, you start performing emotionally. You chase results instead of building skill. You rush instead of refining. And rushing destroys quality. It's not about speed. It's about consistency. That's discipline. It's not about outcomes. It's about discipline. That's the key. Look at high performers again. They don't wake up thinking about trophies. They think about reps, training, preparation, execution. Outcomes are a byproduct, not a target. The moment you chase applause, you lose focus. That's the key. Now let's talk about instability. Emotional attachment to outcomes creates 3 problems. First, anxiety. You start worrying about things you cannot control. Second, impatience. You want shortcuts. Third, identity damage. You tie your self-worth to wins and losses. That's a fragile way to live. Mentally unshakable people don't live like that. They detach emotionally from results. Not because they don't care, but because they care about what actually works. That's the key. Detachment does not mean indifference. It means focus. You care deeply about the process and lightly about the outcome. That balance keeps you calm. That's the key. Here's a practical example. Two people are building something. Person one checks results constantly. Views, numbers, feedback. Every dip affects their mood. Person two ignores results for weeks. They show up daily. They improve daily. They execute daily. Who lasts longer? Who wins? The one obsessed with execution. That's the key. Now let's install a rule. You measure effort, not outcome. Did you show up? Did you follow the plan? Did you execute the standard? Yes or no, that's it. You don't need their permission. Not the audience's, not the market's, not anyone's. Your job is execution. That's the key. Another rule. Stop emotional forecasting. Stop saying, if this doesn't work, then what if this fails? That's outcome obsession pretending to be planning. Planning focuses on actions. Worry focuses on scenarios. One builds strength, the other drains it. That's the key. Now hear this carefully. The process is boring, repetitive, unsexy, good. That's why it works. If you need excitement, you will sabotage consistency. Growth happens quietly. Obsess over execution, not applause. That's the key. Let's talk about patience. Patience is not passive waiting. Patience is active consistency. You do the work. Then you do it again. Then again. Without emotional reward. That's discipline. That's the key. Most people quit right before momentum compounds. Why? Because they are outcome-driven. They expected emotional payoff too early. Mentally unshakable people don't need early rewards. They trust the process because they are the process. That's the key. Here's another instruction. Delay celebration. Don't celebrate progress prematurely. It releases emotional pressure too early. Finish the work. Then acknowledge. That keeps hunger alive. That's discipline. That's the key. Now understand this. When you detach from outcomes, pressure decreases. Because outcomes are heavy, they carry expectations, judgment, fear. Processes are light. You can carry them daily. That's why detachment creates calm. That's the key. Let's reframe success. Success is not a moment, it's a pattern. And patterns are built through repetition, not applause, not recognition. Repetition. That's the key. Another behavioral instruction. At the end of each day, ask one question only. Did I execute today? Not, did I win? Not, did it work? Execution is the only controllable metric. That's the key. Now listen closely. This chapter removes ego from the equation. Ego wants results fast. Ego wants validation. Ego wants to be seen. Discipline doesn't care. Discipline cares about showing up tomorrow. That's the key. If you detach from outcomes long enough, something powerful happens. You become harder to shake, harder to distract, harder to discourage, because no single result can define you. You define yourself by behavior. That's mental strength. That's the key. But here's the next layer. Detaching from outcomes also requires reducing noise, because noise pulls your attention outward, toward opinions, toward reactions, toward explanations. and that weakens authority. You've mastered pressure. You've detached from outcomes. Now it's time to protect your energy. It's time to understand why silence builds power and noise drains it. You've learned to execute without emotional attachment. Now let's remove the need to explain. Prepare yourself. Chapter 9. Cut emotional dependencies. If you need approval, you are not free. That's the truth. The moment you depend on validation, you surrender control. Not loudly, quietly, consistently. That's the key. Most people believe they are independent thinkers. They are not. They are emotionally outsourced. Their confidence depends on praise. Their courage depends on support. Their decisions depend on acceptance. That is not strength. That is dependency. You have a choice. Live directed from the inside, or live managed by other people's reactions. That's the key. Let's say it clearly. Needing approval is emotional slavery. Say it again. Needing approval is emotional slavery. When someone's opinion can change your behavior, they own leverage over you, not because they are powerful, but because you made them powerful. That's the key. Look at how this plays out. People hesitate to speak truth because they fear rejection. They avoid bold action because they fear judgment. They dilute themselves to stay liked. That is not kindness. That is fear. And fear dressed as politeness still controls you. That's the key. Mentally unshakable people do something radically different. They stop asking, "Will they approve?" and start asking, "Is this aligned with my standard?" That shift is everything. That's the key. Approval seeking creates instability. Why? Because approval is inconsistent. People change moods. Crowds shift opinions. Praise turns into criticism overnight. If your self-worth depends on something unstable, you will be unstable. That's the key. Here's the hard truth. You cannot be mentally strong and widely approved at the same time. Not consistently. Strength creates friction. Discipline creates discomfort. Standards offend people who lack them. That's normal. You don't need their permission to outgrow them. That's the key. Now listen carefully. Cutting emotional dependency does not mean becoming rude. It means becoming self-directed. You stop outsourcing confidence. You stop borrowing courage. You stop waiting for green lights. You act from internal authority. That's discipline. It's not about arrogance. It's about discipline. That's the key. Let's talk about social approval. Social approval is addictive. Likes, compliments, recognition, they feel good in the moment and weaken you long term. Because every hit trains you to seek the next one. That's dependency. That's the key. Mentally unshakable people treat approval like sugar. Occasional, non-essential, never relied on. They don't need constant reassurance to move. They trust their standards. That's the key. Here's a real-world example. Someone wants to change their life, but their environment mocks discipline, calls it extreme, calls it unnecessary. Most people fold. Why? Because they need approval from the same people who are stuck. That's emotional slavery. That's the key. Mentally unshakable people don't explain themselves. They change quietly. You don't need their permission to evolve. That's the key. Another example. You know what you need to do, but you hesitate because you don't want to disappoint someone. That hesitation costs you momentum, and momentum is hard to rebuild. Approval seeking delays action. Delay kills progress. That's the key. Now let's install rules. Rule 1. Stop explaining your decisions excessively. The more you explain, the more approval you're seeking. Strong decisions don't require consensus. That's discipline. That's the key. Rule 2. Expect resistance when you improve. If no one resists your growth, you are not growing enough. Resistance is feedback. That's the key. Rule 3. Disappoint people who benefit from you staying small. Say that again internally. Disappoint people who benefit from you staying small. You don't owe anyone stagnation. That's the key. Now understand this. Emotional dependency often hides behind loyalty, family expectations, social roles, cultural pressure. But loyalty that costs you your future is not loyalty. It's fear. You have a choice. Honor your standards or betray yourself slowly. That's the key. Let's talk about inner authority. Inner authority means you trust your judgment even when others disagree. Not because you're always right, but because you're responsible. Responsibility replaces approval. That's the key. When you own responsibility, you don't need validation. You don't need permission. You don't need agreement. You act. You adjust. You learn. That's strength. That's the key. Another behavioral instruction. Spend time alone intentionally. Solitude removes social noise. It recalibrates your internal compass. People who fear being alone often fear their own thoughts. Mentally unshakable people use solitude to strengthen identity. That's the key. Another instruction. Stop announcing your plans. Announcement invites opinions. Opinions invite doubt. Doubt drains energy. Move in silence. Results speak. That's discipline. That's the key. Now hear this. The need for approval never fully disappears. It is human. But discipline means you do not obey it. You notice the urge. You don't act on it. You have a choice. Seek comfort or choose growth. That's the key. When you cut emotional dependencies, something powerful happens. Your decisions become faster. Your mind becomes quieter. Your confidence becomes stable, not because everyone supports you, but because you support yourself. That's mental strength. That's the key. And now comes the final transformation. Once you stop needing approval, once you detach from outcomes, once you master pressure, you face a new challenge. Boredom, repetition, monotony, the quiet grind. Most people quit here because they mistake boredom for failure. But boredom is not the enemy. Boredom is the forge. You've cut emotional dependency. Now you must learn to stay disciplined when nothing feels exciting. That's where real power is built. Prepare yourself. Chapter 10. Boredom is a weapon. Boredom is not a problem. Boredom is a filter. That's the key. Most people think boredom means something is wrong. It doesn't. It means repetition has begun. And repetition is where growth lives. Boredom is where discipline is forged. Say it again. Boredom is where discipline is forged. That's the key. Look closely at where most people fail. They don't fail from difficulty. They fail from monotony. The excitement fades. The novelty disappears. The dopamine drops. And they quit. Not because they can't do the work, but because the work stopped feeling rewarding. That's emotional weakness. You have a choice. Chase stimulation or build strength. That's the key. Mentally unshakable people understand something most people never learn. Progress is boring. Real progress is quiet, uncelebrated, repetitive, same routine, same standards, same execution, day after day. That's discipline. It's not about excitement. It's about discipline. That's the key. Let's be clear. If you need excitement to stay consistent, you are still emotionally controlled. If you need novelty to keep going, your discipline is weak. Strong people don't need stimulation. They need structure. That's the key. Look at training. Athletes don't train new moves every day. They repeat fundamentals, same drills, same reps, same form, over and over. Boring. And that boredom builds dominance. That's the key. Look at skill. Masters repeat basics longer than amateurs repeat variety. Amateurs chase excitement. Masters chase precision. Precision comes from boredom. That's the key. Now listen carefully. Boredom is uncomfortable because it removes emotional reward. There is no applause, no novelty, no rush, just execution. And that's why boredom is powerful, because it forces discipline to replace motivation. That's the key. Most people confuse boredom with lack of progress. They say, "It feels like nothing is happening." Wrong. Everything is happening internally. Identity is being built. That's the key. You don't become mentally unshakable during exciting moments. You become mentally unshakable during repetitive ones. When you show up without emotional reward. That's discipline. That's the key. Here's the truth. Boredom exposes intention. If you quit when things get boring, you were never committed. You were entertained. That's the key. Mentally unshakable people don't need entertainment from their goals. They need alignment. They do the work because it's required, not because it's fun. You don't need their permission, not excitements, not motivations. You execute anyway. That's the key. Now let's talk about routines. Routines are boring by design. Same wake-up, same structure, same priorities. And that's exactly why they stabilize the mind. When life is chaotic, routine is grounding. Boredom creates calm. That's the key. People who avoid boredom are usually avoiding themselves. Silence, stillness, repetition. Those things reveal internal weakness. Mentally unshakable people lean into boredom. They use it as training. That's the key. Now let's install rules. Rule 1. Do not change routines just because you feel bored. Boredom is not a signal to quit. It's a signal that discipline is taking over. That's the key. Rule 2. Reduce stimulation intentionally. Constant stimulation weakens focus. It trains impatience. Silence and repetition rebuild attention span. That's discipline. That's the key. Rule 3. Fall in love with execution, not emotion. Emotion fluctuates. Execution compounds. That's the key. Now understand this. Boredom is where weak minds look for escape. Strong minds look for refinement. What can I improve by 1% today? What can I do cleaner? What can I repeat better? That mindset turns boredom into mastery. That's the key. Another truth. The longer you stay consistent, the less exciting it feels. And that's a good sign. Because excitement is front-loaded. Results are back-loaded. Most people quit in the middle. Mentally unshakable people don't. That's the key. Let's address resistance. Your mind will say, "This is pointless. This isn't working. I need something new." That voice is not truth. That voice is withdrawal. You are withdrawing from emotional stimulation, and withdrawal always feels uncomfortable. That's the key. Do not obey that voice. You have a choice. Obey boredom, or obey discipline. That's the key. Now hear this carefully. Boredom trains patience. Patience trains control. Control creates mental unshakability. This is not accidental. That's the key. If you can execute when bored, you can execute anywhere. Under pressure, under stress, under fatigue. Boredom is the rehearsal for adversity. That's the key. Another behavioral instruction. When you feel bored, narrow your focus. Do the next small action, not the whole plan. Boredom comes from looking too far ahead. Execution lives in the present step. That's discipline. That's the key. Another instruction. Stop chasing new habits, new plans, new systems. Most people don't need new systems. They need to stay with the old one. Consistency beats novelty. That's the key. Now understand this. Boredom is neutral. You decide what it means. You can label it as failure, or you can label it as training. Label it correctly. Pressure was training. Boredom is training. Different form. Same purpose. That's the key. As you master boredom, something changes. You stop needing motivation. You stop craving validation. You stop reacting emotionally. You become steady. And steady people are dangerous. That's the key. You've now removed excitement as a requirement. You've removed approval as a requirement. You've removed outcomes as a requirement. All that's left is standards. Standards are what carry you through boredom, through pressure, through silence. You are ready for the next level. You've learned to act without emotion, without motivation, without excitement. Now it's time to lock in standards that make this permanent. Because standards remove choice. And choice is where weakness hides. You forged discipline through boredom. Now let's formalize it. Chapter 11. Mental toughness is built through standards. Mental toughness is not built through willpower. It is built through standards. That's the key. Willpower fluctuates. Standards don't. When life gets difficult, you don't rise to your intentions. You fall to your standards. That's the truth. Standards remove choice. Choice creates weakness. Say it again. Standards remove choice. Choice creates weakness. That's the key. Most people live in constant internal debate. Should I do it today? Maybe later. I'll decide in the moment. That internal negotiation drains energy. It creates hesitation. It invites emotion into every decision. Mentally unshakable people eliminate this entirely. They don't debate. They don't negotiate. They follow standards. That's discipline. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline. That's the key. Let's define standards clearly. A standard is a rule you do not argue with. Not a goal. Not a preference. A rule. Rules don't care how you feel. That's why they work. You have a choice. Live by standards or live by emotions. One builds strength. The other builds inconsistency. That's the key. Most people confuse standards with restriction. They say, I don't want to be too rigid. That's fear talking. Structure does not limit you. Structure liberates you, because when decisions are made in advance, emotions lose power. That's the key. Think about this. How much energy do you waste deciding what to do? When to start? How hard to push? Standards eliminate all of that. You wake up. You execute. No debate. That's mental toughness. That's the key. Now let's get practical. Standards must exist in 4 areas: sleep, work, response, focus. Without standards in these areas, mental strength collapses under pressure. That's the key. First, sleep. Sleep is not optional. Sleep is a standard. Same bedtime, same wake time, no negotiation. When sleep is inconsistent, everything becomes emotional. Fatigue weakens discipline. That's the key. Second, work. Work standards define who you are, how you show up, how you finish, how you handle boredom. A work standard says, I execute even when I don't feel like it. That's discipline. That's the key. Third, response. This is critical. How you respond to stress, to disrespect, to failure. If your responses are emotional, your standards are weak. A response standard says, I pause, I stay calm, I act deliberately. No exceptions. That's mental toughness. That's the key. Fourth, focus. Focus is not something you hope for. It is enforced. A focus standard says, no distractions during execution. Phone away. Attention narrow. Task finished. That's discipline, that's the key. Now understand this. Standards are not complicated. They are simple. But simple does not mean easy. Simple means clear. Clarity removes emotional debate. That's the key. Here's where most people fail. They create flexible standards. I usually wake up early. I try to stay calm. I do my best. That's not a standard. That's a suggestion. Suggestions don't hold under pressure. Standards do, that's the key. Mentally unshakable people don't rely on usually. They rely on always. Always means always. That's discipline. That's the key. Now let's address resistance. Your mind will resist standards. It will say, this is too strict. This is too much. I need flexibility. That voice is weakness protecting itself. You don't need their permission, not your mind's, not your emotions. Standards are not negotiable. That's the key. Another truth. The more choices you have, the weaker your discipline becomes. Every choice is a doorway for emotion. Standards close those doors. That's the key. This is why leaders appear calm. They don't decide in chaos. They decide in advance. When pressure arrives, they follow the rule. No thinking, no panic, just execution. That's mental toughness. That's the key. Here's a behavioral instruction. Write your standards down. Not goals, not hopes, rules. When X happens, I do Y. Examples. When I wake up, I move immediately. When I feel anger, I pause. When I work, I remove distractions. Clear, specific, non-negotiable. That's discipline. That's the key. Another instruction. Do not justify breaking standards. Justification is emotional bargaining. The moment you justify, the standard is dead. Standards only work when they are absolute. That's the key. Now hear this carefully. Standards are not punishment. They are protection. They protect you from weak moments, from bad days, from emotional decisions. They carry you when motivation disappears. That's why they matter. That's the key. Most people rely on how they feel. Mentally unshakable people rely on what they decided. That's the difference. You have a choice. Be ruled by feelings or be guided by standards. That's the key. Another truth. Standards must be enforced daily, not occasionally, not when convenient. Daily enforcement builds identity. When you keep standards, you trust yourself, and self-trust eliminates anxiety. That's the key. You don't need external confidence. You need internal reliability. Standards create reliability. That's discipline. That's the key. As you lock in standards, something powerful happens. Life feels simpler. Decisions feel lighter. Pressure feels manageable. Because you are no longer improvising your life. You are executing it. That's mental strength. That's the key. You've now removed emotion from decision-making, removed boredom as a threat, removed approval as a need. You are no longer reactive. You are directive. But now comes the final step. All of this must be operationalized, daily, relentlessly, for 30 days, because mental strength is not learned once. It is installed through repetition. You've built the tools. Now you need the protocol, the structure that turns discipline into identity. You mastered boredom. You enforced standards. Now it's time to bring everything together. No theory, no fluff, just execution. Prepare yourself. Chapter 12. The 30-Day Unshakable Protocol. Knowledge does not change you. Execution does. That's the key. You've learned principles. You've built standards. You've stripped emotion out of decision-making. Now comes the only thing that matters. Application. Mental toughness is not an idea. It is a routine. And routines only work when they are non-negotiable. That's the key. This chapter is not theory. It is a protocol. Simple, repeatable, relentless. Do it daily. No exceptions. Say it again. Do it daily. No exceptions. That's the key. The next 30 days are not about intensity. They are about consistency. You are not trying to be heroic. You are trying to be reliable. Reliability builds identity. That's the key. This protocol has 3 pillars: silence, structure, execution. Miss one, and instability returns. Follow all 3, and your mind hardens. That's the key. Let's break them down. Pillar 1. Silence. Silence is not empty. Silence is control. Every day you will deliberately reduce noise, external noise, internal noise, because noise fuels reaction. That's the key. Here is the rule. You do not react immediately to messages, to criticism, to stress. You pause. That pause is power. You have a choice. React impulsively or remain in control. That's the key. Daily silence practice means no phone first thing in the morning, no emotional responses in the moment, no unnecessary explanations. You don't need their permission to stay silent. Silence is not weakness. Silence is authority. That's the key. Every day you practice silence, you strengthen emotional control. And emotional control is the foundation of mental unshakability. Pillar 2. Structure. Structure replaces chaos. Without structure, emotions run the day. With structure, discipline runs the day. That's the key. Your structure is simple. Same wake-up time, same morning routine, same work blocks. No negotiation. Structure removes choice. Choice creates weakness. That's the key. Every day, structure answers questions before they arise. When do I work? When do I rest? When do I focus? No debate. You execute the plan because it's the plan. That's discipline. It's not about flexibility. It's about reliability. That's the key. Daily structure means planned mornings, defined work periods, clear priorities. You don't decide if you'll do it. You only decide how well you'll do it. That's the key. Pillar 3. Execution. Execution is the final filter. Everything comes down to this. Did you do what you said you would do? Yes or no? That's it. No emotions, no excuses, no stories. Execution is the only metric that matters. That's the key. Every day you will execute even when you're tired, you're bored, you're unmotivated, especially then, because that's when discipline is trained. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline. That's the key. Execution means completing tasks without emotional negotiation, following standards even on bad days, acting regardless of mood. You have a choice. Execute anyway, or reinforce weakness. That's the key. The daily rules. Now listen carefully. These rules apply every day for 30 days. Not most days, not good days, every day. Rule 1. You do not negotiate with your feelings. Feelings are noted, not obeyed. That's the key. Rule 2. You control your reactions. No emotional outbursts. No impulsive responses. Pause first. That's discipline. That's the key. Rule 3. You protect your time. No drifting. No aimless scrolling. Time is either structured or wasted. That's the key. Rule 4. You execute one priority fully, not 10 things poorly, one thing properly. That's discipline. That's the key. Rule 5. You end the day with self-accountability. One question only. Did I execute today? Not, did I feel good? Not, was it easy? Execution is the score. That's the key. What to expect: the first week will feel uncomfortable. Good. That means old habits are dying. The second week will feel boring. Perfect. That means discipline is taking over. The third week will feel calmer. That means control is installing. The fourth week will feel different. Not excited. Not dramatic. Stable. That's mental unshakability. That's the key. You are not chasing a feeling. You are building a baseline. A baseline of calm, of control, of discipline. That baseline becomes your new normal. What to stop doing: stop waiting to feel ready. Stop seeking validation. Stop explaining yourself. You don't need their permission. Not from people. Not from emotions. Not from circumstances. That's the key. Stop quitting mentally before quitting physically. Most people fail internally long before they stop showing up. You won't. Because you have standards now. That's the key. Why this works: this protocol works because it removes emotion from the equation. Emotion creates chaos. Structure creates order. Order creates calm. Calm creates control. Control creates strength. That's the chain. And it only works if you don't break it. Do it daily. No exceptions. That's the key. Final instruction. Do not personalize failure. If you miss a day, you don't spiral. You reset immediately. No guilt, no drama. Standards are enforced forward. That's discipline. That's the key. You are not becoming perfect. You are becoming consistent. Consistency beats perfection every time. You've now been given the system, not inspiration, not hype, a system. If you follow it, you will not recognize the person you were 30 days ago, not because life changed, but because you did. You've learned to control emotions, to stop reacting, to execute without motivation, to master boredom, to enforce standards. Now there is only one thing left, a final command, a final challenge. No teaching, no explanation, just truth. You've built the unshakable mind. Now it's time to commit to it. Prepare yourself. Final closing. The challenge. Mental strength is not something you discover. It is something you enforce. Every day, life will test you. And every day, you will either react or remain in control. You now understand the truth. Emotions are signals, not commands. Discipline is not punishment. It is freedom. Silence is power. Consistency is dominance. For the next 30 days, you will not wait to feel ready. You will act anyway. You will control your mornings, your reactions, your thoughts, and your standards. This is your challenge. Become predictable in discipline and unpredictable in strength. No excuses. No emotional negotiations. Just execution. Train the mind, and nothing can shake you.